Imagine the instant when time folds back on itself. No clock can measure it, no calendar can contain it. It is in this suspended space between what we call the past and what we still dare to call the future that Dolores Cannon's voice manifests itself, not as a distant figure, but as a presence that vibrates in every silent thought, in every memory that insists on returning when we believe we have already forgotten everything. Her voice doesn't speak of theories, but of memories. And she begins with a simple, almost innocent provocation. What if what you call learning wasn't achievement, but memory? For centuries, humanity believed that mastery, talent, and expertise depended on effort, repetition, and time. The 10,000-hour rule became a modern dogma, a belief that shaped entire generations. Practice more, start earlier, sacrifice the present for a better tomorrow. That's how we measured the value of a human being, by how much they produce, how much they anticipate, how much they discipline themselves. But while the world chased after the clock, Dolores observed something deeper. She saw in the subtle intricacies of consciousness that it is not time that teaches, it is the soul that remembers. Time merely provides the setting where memory unfolds. Dolores used to say that time is a carefully designed illusion so that we can experience learning as if it were a linear journey. In reality, she said, everything happens simultaneously. All your lives, all your talents, all your pains and discoveries coexist in a luminous spiral, and what you call progress is merely the focus moving from one point to another within that same spiral. When you learn something, you are simply adjusting the frequency of your consciousness to tune into a version of yourself that already knew. That is why some learn easily what others struggle to understand. It is not merit nor chance, it is remembrance. She observed with tenderness how humanity idolized stories of early beginnings. The golf prodigy who held a club as a baby, the child who memorized sheet music before learning to read, the mathematician who seemed to speak with numbers. Stories that fascinated us because they seemed to confirm that success belongs to those who started earlier, to those who never strayed from the path. But Dolores saw the same narrative in a different light. These beings were no longer disciplined. They had simply thinned the veil a little more between the present and what they had already lived. Talent is not a privilege of the body, but an echo of past experiences. Each emerging skill is a remembered thread from the great tapestry of the soul. What if this tapestry were being woven right before our eyes, invisible to the eye, but perceptible to intuition? Dolores said that every choice we make, every path we abandon, is connected to a vast network of possibilities. When we choose blind effort, we miss the music the universe tries to play through us. Because the soul doesn't move by the logic of haste. It dances to the frequency of curiosity. That's why many feel guilty for not knowing what to do with their lives. It's the ego that demands goals and deadlines. The soul only desires to explore. And what we call indecision may actually be the harbinger of a great leap. Dolores would smile upon hearing someone proudly repeat, "Practice makes perfect." For her, perfection was never the destination. It was the point of origin. You were born perfect. Practice merely removes the layers of forgetfulness accumulated over lifetimes, systems, and beliefs. Every mistake is an attempt by the soul to remember how to create anew. Suffering is the friction between what you think you are and what you deep down remember being. Therefore, moments of doubt, failures, and falls are not signs of weakness, but portals of remembrance. The universe trains us not to win, but to remember. It is in this understanding that the concept of time completely dissolves. Dolores said that there is a point where the past and the future become the same, a vibrant field of possibilities that responds to conscious observation. When you believe you are starting from scratch, you are actually reopening an old path. When you think you are behind schedule, you are simply reviewing a lesson from a new perspective. Life is a spiral, not a line. Each turn brings the same landscapes, but seen from a higher angle. This is how the soul evolves, not forward, but inward. The myth of the 10,000 hours, then, is not false. It's just misinterpreted. The 10,000 hours don't refer to physical activity, but to presence. These are the hours you spend consciously observing yourself, your emotions, your reactions, your intentions. These are the hours you allow yourself to be in the present moment without fighting against what is. It is in this state that memory manifests spontaneously. and talent returns as a natural extension of the awakened soul. You don't become great because you trained. You become great because you finally remembered. There is something profoundly liberating in this thought, but also unsettling, because if it's true that nothing is learned and everything is remembered, then all responsibility for awakening falls on each of us. There are no more masters to follow, only mirrors that remind us of who we once were. Dolores always warned, "Don't believe me. Believe in the resonance of what you feel when you hear." And that's exactly where the mystery lies, because this resonance is not emotion, it's memory. Something within us recognizes the truth before the mind can explain it. Perhaps that's why, when Dolores spoke, many wept without understanding why. It wasn't sadness, it was reunion. It was the soul saying, "Yes, I remember this." And it is this call that echoes now in this first portal, that of the illusion of time. The portal that opens when you realize there is no hurry, because there was never any distance. That each second of your life is just a fold in a much larger story, written not on pages, but in frequencies. Dolores whispers, with a serene and firm voice, "Time is not passing, it is remembering." And when that phrase resonates, the silence that follows is not empty. It's the space where something awakens. A spark of recognition, small but powerful enough to change the course of everything. Because suddenly, the viewer is no longer listening to a story, they are seeing themselves within it. And this perception, subtle and inevitable, is the true beginning of the journey. The first portal opens. The rest, Dolores would say with a slight smile, is just memory. There are moments in life when everything seems disconnected, as if we were participating in a series of rehearsals without knowing what the final performance will be. We work, we study, we try to be good at something, and yet we feel that there is a missing piece, a meaning that slips through our fingers. It is in this space between doing and understanding that Dolores Cannon's voice resurfaces, soft and curious, reminding us that nothing is by chance, that the apparent chaos is merely the way the soul chooses to recognize itself. She said that life is not a straight race but an expanding mosaic, and that each fragment of experience, even the most confusing, is an indispensable piece of the grand design. Dolores used to compare human learning to a symphony in progress. No one starts out knowing how to play all the instruments, and even the conductor, before conducting, needs to hear the sound of each note individually. When we look at athletes who try one sport and then another, or at musicians who switch instruments until they find the tone that moves them, we see only indecision. But according to Dolores, it is precisely these detours that reveal the true map of the soul. The universe does not reward those who follow the shortest route, but rather those who have the courage to get lost on the right path. She liked to recount how, in her regression sessions, many people who considered themselves fickle discovered, under hypnosis, that they had lived countless lives in different roles: artists, warriors, healers, navigators, and that this impulse to experience various things was not dispersion, but echo. The soul remembered old passions and tried, without realizing it, to touch them again. That's why someone might feel fascinated by a language they've never studied, or a strange affinity for a place they've never visited. It's not coincidence, it's memory. A memory that insists on manifesting itself through curiosity. Dolores said that curiosity is the purest voice of the soul. It arises when the higher plane whispers, "There is something more to discover." It is a calling, and ignoring it is like plugging your ears to your own destiny. How many times have you felt the urge to change everything, to change careers, cities, lives, and given up because you were told it was too late? How many times have you felt that there was something different about you, a restlessness that the world called indecision, but which, deep down, was your spirit asking for space to breathe? Dolores called this active memory, the moment when the soul begins to pull back the forgotten threads of its own history. She told the story of a man who sought her help believing he had wasted his life. At 50, after a series of professional failures, he said he hadn't found his purpose. During regression, he saw himself as an explorer in an ancient maritime civilization, mapping stars to guide ships. When he regained consciousness, he was crying, not from sadness, but from recognition. He understood then that his modern restlessness, the desire to travel, to seek something new, was not failure, but continuation. His soul hadn't given up, only changed scenery. Dolores viewed these stories naturally, For her, these so-called detours are simply the way the universe repositions each being in the correct rhythm of its melody. That's why she said that the most curious souls are, paradoxically, the wisest. They are the ones who dare to walk through territories where nothing seems to make sense. They are the ones who allow the unexpected to guide them. It is in this surrender that the greatest leaps of consciousness occur. When the human believes they are lost, the spirit finally finds itself. She provoked her listeners with simple yet profound questions. What if what you call a mistake is the exact point where your soul decided to grow? What if the doors that closed weren't intended to prevent, but to redirect? These questions disarmed certainties, and something in each person began to give way. Because however much we try to organize life into goals, deadlines, and rules, there is always a moment when chance surprises us. An encounter, a coincidence, a twist of fate. Dolores said that, at those times, the universe is simply realigning the pieces, reminding us that the script was never entirely ours. She also spoke about the difference between the mind's plane and the soul's plane. The mind seeks coherence. It wants proof and guarantees. The soul seeks expansion and is moved by the impulse to feel. When a person feels the desire to change, but fear paralyzes them, conflict arises between these two worlds. Dolores said that suffering arises when we insist on living only by logic. The universe doesn't speak in sentences, she said. It speaks in synchronicities. And each synchronicity is a clue. When something repeats itself in your life, a number, a name, a theme, it's not a coincidence. It's the universe trying to remind you of a path you promised to follow before you were born. It's curious how these ideas, at first glance, seem distant from everyday life. But a closer look reveals how intertwined they are with what we call normal life. The child who changes sports every week, the adult who changes careers, the elderly person who discovers a late-blooming talent. All are responding to the same invisible call. Dolores said that curiosity is the most direct instrument of evolution. The soul doesn't grow through effort, but through discovery. Every new interest is a seed planted at another level of consciousness. Deep down, we're all just trying to remember what we came here to do, and the memory doesn't always come like a flash. Sometimes it comes as a small, almost silent desire to experience something different. Dolores called this the breath of the soul, the first sign that the spirit is ready to expand. That's why she said nothing is random, neither fleeting passions nor seemingly trivial opportunities. Everything is part of a larger, invisible, but precise architecture. The listener who hears her words may feel a strange mixture of calm and unease. Calm because they realize there is no possible mistake, and unease because they understand that perhaps they have not yet heard all the calls. And it is precisely this feeling that keeps the heart awake. Because, as Dolores said, when the soul remembers that it came to learn through experience, the fear of getting lost disappears. And for a moment, that memory changes everything. What once seemed like indecision becomes a compass. What seemed like a delay transforms into perfect timing. It is at this point that the second portal opens, that of experience. Life ceases to be a race in pursuit of results and becomes a dance between dimensions. And while the world continues to measure value in deadlines and achievements, something within you begins to understand that the true purpose is not in winning, but to remember what you came to feel. There is an almost invisible thread connecting all the choices we make, even those that seemed like mere accidents. Dolores Cannon said that this thread is made of spiritual memory, not cerebral recollection, a silent tapestry that runs through lives, bodies, and centuries, guiding each of us along paths that, at first glance, seem disconnected. This is why so many people looking back feel that nothing they experienced was truly lost. The failures, the detours, the mistakes, everything fits together as if planned on a secret map that is only now beginning to reveal itself. Dolores called this the return of coherence, the moment when the human being realizes that they are not learning anything new, only reorganizing fragments of a wisdom that has always been there. She observed this pattern in the stories of extraordinary people and in those of ordinary people. The artist who changes course several times before creating something revolutionary. The scientist who discovers the essential while searching for something else. The simple worker who, without realizing it, carries an intuition that anticipates the future. For Dolores, all these trajectories are expressions of the same principle. Knowledge is not born from specialization, but from integration. When different experiences intersect within the same consciousness, a creative spark arises, an expanded memory. It is the moment when the individual ceases to be only himself and becomes a synthesis of all his versions. But what happens when the soul begins to remember more than the ego can bear? When memories of other times, other lives or dimensions begin to emerge amidst routine. Dolores described this as the beginning of a true awakening. For some, it comes in vivid dreams. For others, in seemingly random encounters, or in the sudden sensation of déjà vu. There are also those who feel an unnameable nostalgia, a longing for something they never experienced. And what if this nostalgia is the echo of a parallel life calling to be acknowledged? Dolores believed that the veil between realities is much thinner than we suppose. In her sessions, she witnessed people accessing memories with impossible details, names of extinct cities, forgotten languages, atmospheres that no mind could invent. But what fascinated her most was not the content of the memories, it was the effect they produced. When someone saw themselves in another body, another time, something changed forever. The fear of loss diminished, the attachment to control weakened, because by remembering that life is a cycle, death ceases to be the end. And at that moment, the ego realizes that it is only one of the many masks of the same eternal consciousness. How many times have you felt like you were repeating a story, even without knowing why? How many times have you met someone and had that unmistakable feeling of reunion, as if the bonds predated this life? Dolores said that reunions are not coincidences. They are reactivations of spiritual contracts made on other planes. The people who challenge us the most are often the same ones who swore to help us evolve. The enemy can be the most faithful ally, disguised to fulfill an old promise. This completely changes the way we look at suffering, doesn't it? The human mind is frightened by this idea because it dissolves the victim narrative and forces us to accept responsibility for our own story. Dolores believed that when we resist what life brings, it's because we've forgotten the purpose behind each experience. Suffering becomes a persistent reminder that there is something that needs to be acknowledged, and acknowledgement, she said, is the beginning of healing. It's not necessary to understand everything. Simply allow the memory to pass through the body and reach the heart. There is, however, a mysterious point that Dolores rarely explained directly. Where do these memories come from? She suggested that they don't belong to a single person, but to the very field of universal consciousness. It's as if each being were an antenna tuning into different frequencies of the same ocean of experience. This means that when someone recalls a past life, they may not be accessing their past, but a shared line of information. A collective memory of humanity. If so, how much of us is truly us? This question, Dolores said, is the threshold between doubt and enlightenment. Because when we stop seeing consciousness as something individual and begin to perceive it as a living network, the boundaries of identity dissolve. It is at this point that many feel vertigo. The idea of not being just an individual, but a temporary expression of a totality, can be liberating and frightening at the same time. Perhaps that is why most prefer to remain in the comfort of forgetfulness. But memory always finds a way back. Dolores saw this process as the true purpose of existence. Each life, each role, is an attempt by consciousness to understand itself in new ways. When Van Gogh painted the swirling sky, he was translating into color and movement what words could not explain. When Mariam Mirzakhani solved impossible equations, she was describing the secret rhythm of creation in mathematical language. When Duke Ellington refused to follow methods, he was listening to the primordial music that echoes before any note. None of them were lost. They were simply listening to the call of their other parts. And you, what do you think you're trying to remember? What does your curiosity reveal about what you came to restore in this time? Dolores said that the most powerful gifts often arrive disguised as distractions. What the world calls a detour, the soul recognizes as a clue. Nothing is random. Everything that awakens fascination in you is a fragment of your purpose trying to emerge. The souvenir, however, does not come without cost. As the being recalls its multiple existences, linearity dissolves. Dreams become more vivid. Coincidences multiply. Time loses its rigidity. The mind struggles to maintain control, but the soul already knows there is no going back. Dolores said that this is the point at which the human becomes a traveler, no longer of space, but of consciousness. And when the traveler accepts the journey, He realizes that there is no final destination, only the constant expansion of memory. Perhaps this is the simplest and most magnificent secret that Dolores left behind. The universe is not something to be conquered, but remembered. Each life, each person, each choice is a mirror of this memory in motion. And when everything seems uncertain, he whispers, somewhere within us, do not fear what returns. It is only the echo of what you have always been, calling by the name that time forgot, but that the soul never stopped hearing. There is a silent force that traverses the world, uniting people who have never met, but who share the same inexplicable impulse to transform reality. Dolores Cannon called these souls volunteers, beings who chose to incarnate in this time not to learn, but to remember and teach. They come from different dimensions, from star systems that the human mind is still trying to name, and they arrive with a subtle mission to help Earth navigate a period of vibrational transition. It is a story that seems improbable at first glance, but which repeats itself with unsettling precision in regressions, accounts, and experiences around the world. Dolores heard thousands of voices describing the same feeling, that of not fully belonging to this planet. She explained that these souls are driven by a longing they cannot explain. Many grow up with the feeling that something is out of place, that human rules make no sense. They feel displaced, as if observing the world through an invisible glass. Some suffer in silence, believing themselves to be fragile or strange. Others try to fit in, but something within them resists. Dolores said that this discomfort is the clearest sign of a willing soul. It is not a rejection of earthly life, but a reminder that they came from a plane where harmony is natural and communication occurs through the vibration of thought. Here, everything is dense, fragmented, and memory is lost among the layers of the physical body. Therefore, for these souls, living on Earth is like breathing underwater. In her regressions, Dolores heard accounts that seemed straight out of science fiction, but which were repeated with identical details in people with no connection to each other. A man from the American Midwest described, in a trance, a planet where the mountains were made of crystal, and the light did not come from a sun, but from the air itself. A woman from Scotland spoke of an aquatic civilization that communicated through pulses of colored energy. Neither of them had read anything similar, but both used similar expressions, describing identical sensations of unity and absolute peace. When they returned to consciousness, they cried, not from fear, but from longing. Dolores said that this longing is the purest reminder of the spiritual origin of humankind, proof that we come from many places and that all of them still live within us. She believed that each of these souls carries within them an activation program. It's as if, at a certain point in life, something awakens. A sudden curiosity, a symbolic dream, an encounter that changes everything. The person begins to seek answers that don't fit into common explanations, feels drawn to spiritual or metaphysical themes, or simply feels that they need to do something, even without knowing what. Dolores called this moment the remembrance of the contract. The volunteer doesn't come to save anyone, but to sustain the frequency of the collective awakening. That's why often these people find themselves in professions involving care, art, communication, technology, or science, areas where they can serve as bridges between the visible and the invisible. And have you ever felt that you are here for a reason you can't define? Have you ever had the feeling that certain coincidences are disguised instructions? Dolores said that nothing is a coincidence. The encounters that transform, the losses that redirect, the sudden inspirations, everything is part of a network of connections traced even before birth. According to her, each volunteer brings a specific energy field, and when these fields intersect, they create waves of expansion that affect the environment and the people around them, even without words. It's as if each soul carries a vibrational password capable of reactivating dormant memories in others. Dolores believed that this collective mission began to intensify from the mid-20th century onwards, when the planet entered a new frequency phase. She said that, after World War II, the Earth began to emit a vibrational call to bring help. The waves of volunteers came in 3 generations. The first, born between the 1950s and 1970s, carried the energy of cleansing, making room for the new. The second, between the 1980s and 1990s, came with the energy of transformation, challenging systems, questioning structures. The third, from the new millennium, are the bearers of integration, lighter souls, bringing the frequency of unity. None is more important than the other. They are parts of the same plan which advances as humanity becomes capable of recognizing it. But Dolores also warned, the mission of these souls is not without pain. By choosing to incarnate in a world of such intense density, they submit to complete forgetfulness. They lose the memory of who they are and need to rediscover this through human experience, with all the contradictions it brings. Fear, doubt, attachment, and ego are necessary challenges, mechanisms of resistance that help to further expand consciousness. Many give up, others fall asleep, and some awaken abruptly after traumas, illnesses, or losses that break the rigidity of the old self. It is in these moments of collapse that purpose reappears. Dolores said that pain is the wake-up call for courageous souls. She recalled a striking case, a young woman who dreamed every night of a pulsating blue sphere. Over the course of the sessions, she discovered that this sphere was a symbolic representation of her origin, a star system where consciousnesses communicated through light. During the regression, the woman began to cry and repeated, "I just wanted to remember." When she awoke, something had changed in her gaze. She didn't need to rationally understand what she had seen. She just needed to feel it. Days later, she quit a job she hated and began working with art and vibrational therapies, not as an escape, but because something within her recognized the path. Dolores used to say that when the heart awakens, the rest of life reorganizes itself. There is something profoundly human and at the same time divine in these stories. They remind us that, however ordinary our routines may seem, each of us carries a hidden program of evolution. Perhaps the feeling of being out of place is not a flaw, but a sign of origin. Perhaps the discomfort with the current world is an indication that we have come to rebuild it. Dolores said that voluntary souls are neither heroes nor saints. They are explorers of consciousness, divers into density. They came to learn what it means to love amidst the confusion. They came to remind the rest of us that we are much more than we believe. And it is at this point that the narrative changes tone. The viewer begins to realize that the story is not about others. It's about them, the restlessness they feel, the impulse to seek meaning, the desire to do something greater are not coincidences. They are reminders. Dolores whispers, somewhere inside each of us, "You answered the call," even without realizing it, and for a moment, everything makes sense. The weight of existence transforms into a mission. Doubt becomes direction, and the world, once so chaotic, seems merely the perfect setting for remembrance to occur. Because, as she said, none of us are here by chance. We are all participating in the same disguised mission to remember what oblivion tried to erase. Something strange is happening to the world. Dolores Cannon said that the planet is going through a transitional phase that none of us can ignore. She described this change as a frequency shift, a vibrational displacement so subtle and profound that most people don't consciously perceive it, but feel it. The symptoms are everywhere. Time seems to pass faster, emotions intensify, old structures collapse without warning. Everything that once seemed solid now dissolves, and what was once invisible begins to reveal itself. Dolores compared this process to a cosmic seasonal change. The winter of forgetfulness is ending, and the spring of consciousness is beginning. But this blossoming brings chaos with it, and it is in chaos that the human soul is put to the test. She said that we live between two overlapping worlds. One is the old one, the world of fixed rules, certainties, and known limits. The other is the new one, the world of possibilities, where nothing is definitive and everything is in constant transformation. The first is the world of control, the second, of expansion. The problem is that we are trying to live in both at the same time. We try to plan the future as if the old laws still worked, while the universe is already operating on a different logic. That's why so many feel exhausted, confused, disconnected. It's not personal failure, it's energetic adaptation. The human body, Dolores said, is the first field to feel the Earth's change. In her lectures, she explained that Earth is a living school, and that every upheaval, every crisis, is a lesson in transmutation. The planet is not only changing its climate, but its consciousness, and this change requires that everything that is false be revealed. Political, religious, and economic systems are crumbling because they were not built on truth. Truth is not sustained by power, but by vibration. Dolores said that the old structures are not being destroyed by external forces. They are collapsing under the weight of their own incoherence. When the frequency rises, Everything vibrating below must adjust or fall apart. It is a cosmic law, not a punishment. She recalled that in periods of transition like this, humanity always tries to resist. People seek security in what they know, even if the known imprisons them. But the more they try to hold on to the old, the faster it disintegrates. Dolores recounted that many souls, unable to cope with this intensity, chose to depart before their time, not as punishment, but as redirection. They would return in another phase, with new energies, when the planet was more stable. It was the universe's way of balancing the flow. This idea shocked some, but she explained it calmly. Death is not the end, it's a frequency adjustment. And then came the question that left the audience speechless. What happens to those who remain? Dolores said that those who are here now are here because they accepted crossing the threshold. Every soul present on Earth at this moment chose, consciously or not, to be part of the transition. That is why everything seems more intense. The emotions, the relationships, the challenges. We are being shaped by the very energy we asked to experience. What we feel as disorder is, in fact, reorganization. The old world is trying to teach us what the new world will demand: flexibility, compassion, and the courage to act without guarantees. She observed that, in times like these, humanity tends to divide itself between those who seek to understand and those who try to control. Those who control become ill. Those who understand expand. Dolores explained that we are moving from a friendly environment, where the rules were stable and the results predictable, to an unstable environment, where the laws change as consciousness changes. What once worked ceases to work. Work, relationships, even spirituality. Nothing escapes reconfiguration. It's as if the game has changed the rules without warning us. And yet, the meaning lies in this: learning to play without a manual. She recounted that, in her most recent regressions, she saw more and more people reporting out-of-body experiences, encounters with beings of light, visions of translucent cities floating above the earth. Some described hearing sounds that no one else heard. Others said they saw energy patterns around people. Dolores believed that these perceptions are not delusions, but the beginning of adaptation to the new reality. The veil between dimensions is becoming permeable. What was once the privilege of mediums and sensitives is now becoming common. It is a collective awakening, gradual and inevitable. But this awakening is not gentle. There are nights of anguish, days of disorientation, moments when everything seems to lose its meaning. Dolores said that this happens when the frequency of the soul rises faster than the mind can comprehend. The body reacts with fatigue. The mind creates fear. The ego tries to resist. It is the most delicate point of the transition, the instant when the human tries to maintain a form that no longer exists. And it is at this moment that learning becomes real, because it is at the limit that memory returns. Chaos is the language of rebirth. She believed that, after the initial confusion, a new form of collective consciousness would emerge. People would begin to act in natural cooperation, not by rules, but by empathy. Competition would give way to joint creation. Technology would cease to be a tool of escape and would become an extension of consciousness. Dolores said that this new world will not be built from the outside in, but from the inside out, and that the change will not come from governments or profits, but from small daily choices made by millions of anonymous people who decide to vibrate differently. Finally, she left a warning and a promise. The warning: nothing will remain hidden. The promise: nothing will be lost. Everything that is true will survive the change. Dolores said that humanity is going through a turning point, the moment when it needs to decide whether to continue trying to control the inevitable or to learn to flow with it. She smiled and said, "You asked to be here. You are the builders of the new era. And perhaps this is the most profound turning point of all, realizing that the future isn't arriving, it has already begun. The old world crumbles around us, but something is being born beneath the rubble, something that vibrates with the memory of what we have always been. The sound of this transformation is silent, but those who listen feel it in their hearts." Dolores would say, with that calmness that precedes revelation, "Chaos is not the end, it is merely the sound of the new world awakening. There is a moment when all words cease, and what remains is the silent remembrance of who we are." Dolores Cannon said that true awakening doesn't happen in temples or books, but within ordinary life, in the gaze we offer someone, in the choice to act with kindness, in the courage to listen to our own intuition when everything seems contrary. The purpose of all revelations, she said, is not to create a new belief, but to return the human being to themselves. Because knowledge, when it doesn't transform into experience, is just another kind of forgetting. The awakened soul is not the one that knows, but the one that lives in coherence with what it feels. Now, after passing through all the portals, the viewer realizes that the message was never distant, nor overly mystical. It was always in what seems small, the gesture of taking a deep breath before reacting, the pause to listen instead of responding, the simple act of choosing peace even when anger would be easier. Dolores said that each of these gestures alters the vibration of the planet. A peaceful thought is not just a thought, it's a wave that spreads, touching invisible dimensions. And if the world seems to lose its meaning, perhaps it's just an invitation for us to be the meaning that's missing. She used to repeat that each person is a living cell in the body of the earth, and that individual awakening is the only path to collective awakening. You don't need to abandon everything or isolate yourself in the mountains to evolve. Just start where you are, at work, in your family, in simple conversations. The difference between the old and the new world begins with a single act of awareness. When someone decides not to respond to fear with fear, they break an old chain. When you choose to understand instead of judging, you open a space for the new. This is the alchemy that transforms chaos into wisdom. The secret is not to control what happens, but to choose how to vibrate in response to what happens. Dolores believed that humanity is gradually remembering how to consciously create reality. Thought and emotion are tools of construction. Everything we hold in our minds manifests in some way. Therefore, she advised, watch what you repeat to yourself. Each word is a vibrational command, each intention is a code. When we say, I can't, the universe understands, I'm not ready. When we say, I'm learning, it responds, then I will show you more. It's simple, but you need to be awake to perceive it. The miracle has never been far away, it has always waited for the believing gaze. What if the true meaning of all this is simply remembering that we are creators, that the universe doesn't test us, it only responds to what we emit? Dolores said that awakening is the point where we stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? This simple shift in perspective is the beginning of freedom. Nothing outside of us can save or destroy us, because the source of all experience is within. We are the authors of the story, and at the same time, the characters who live it. Consciousness is the stage and the audience. Time, the script. She used to end her lectures with a tranquil smile and a phrase that sounded like a prayer. You are so much more than you think. You came here to remember. This remembrance is what transforms the everyday into the sacred. There is no separation between the spiritual and the human when the heart is awakened. Work becomes service. Love becomes a path. Silence becomes an answer. Dolores taught that awakening is not an escape from the world, but a new way of inhabiting it. To be light is not to ignore the darkness, but to traverse it without getting lost. If there's one thing we can take away from this journey, it's the certainty that each of us has an irreplaceable role in expanding collective consciousness. What you do with yourself reverberates throughout the planet. Today's choices shape tomorrow's vibration. Don't wait for grand signs or distant promises. The moment of awakening is always now. Look around, breathe, recognize what is already silently blossoming. You are already on the path. You always have been. And if something within you resonated throughout this narrative, it's because the memory has begun. Hold on to that feeling. Carry it into your day, into your conversations, into your challenges. Every conscious gesture is a seed of light planted in the new earth we are creating together. Dolores would say, there is no return after the memory, only expansion. So if this video touched you, allow it to continue fulfilling its purpose. Like, comment, even anonymously, share what you felt, and subscribe to the channel. These small actions keep alive the current of consciousness we are forming here. May each word resonate as a gentle reminder. You are not learning anything new, only remembering. And with each memory, the whole world awakens a little more.